Hi there, I'm Matt Kesselman from Oscillot Audio, and today I'll be showing you how to use our new plugin, Perspective. Let's take a look. For starters, it's important to note that Perspective is a little bit different from most other plugins in that it's not intended for the end user. In fact, people listening to your mixes and masters in most cases will not be hearing anything that Perspective does directly. That's because this plugin is designed for you to be more confident with what it is you're hearing. So I pulled a song from the archives. This is by the very talented Nick Karch. I recommend you guys check him out. And I remember particularly really wishing while working on this song that a plugin like this existed, because this song in particular seems to sound very different on different systems and in different environments. So I found myself moving around a lot from my car to consumer speakers, listening on my cell phone, listening back in the studio, just making sure that everything is balanced and as it should be. Let's have a quick listen, and then we'll start working on this song.
Grace. The pretender tries to steal our eyes, and they're watching now. But I know what I saw, and it reminds me of.
So as you can hear, there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's a deep bass, there's a drum machine, there's real drums, there's all kinds of bells and whistles and vocals that go both deep and high. Here's some deep vocals. So what we want to do is monitor this project in a way that's going to help us gain, and you're going to hear this word a lot, perspective over what it is we're doing. So let's put the plugin on the session and see how it can help us. So in most cases, what you want to do is have perspective be the very last thing in your signal chain. So you want to put the plugin as the very last instance on your master fader. In this case, my master fader is called processing, but it is the very last thing in my signal chain. So I'm going to go ahead and click right here and go to Oscillot or other and select perspective. Now, right away, without any explanation, those of you that have used a recording console in the past with a master section or a monitor controller are already very familiar with how this looks. You have your selectors for speaker set A, B, and C, and you have a whole bunch of other useful controls for monitoring and communication. What makes Perspective very special and very useful is this section right here, H. H stands for hardware. This is where you tell the program what speakers you have. And that way Perspective takes that into account and compensates for the frequency response, transient response, distortion, radiation pattern, and many other factors that come into play with your speakers. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. In a real life situation, I would choose my speakers right here. This Danish company does amazing work. So I would choose these and work with these. But because you're not in the room with me and I don't know what speakers you have, I'm going to go ahead and select no speaker. This is also useful if you're working in headphones or if we don't yet have your speakers in the plugin. By the way, we will be adding new speakers to the plugin as quickly as we can, and every update with new speakers will be free. So in this configuration, which we have here because you're not in the room with me, the plugin is not as accurate as it would be if you had your speaker selected, but even this way, the plugin is extremely useful. So let's go ahead and select some speakers that we want to listen to. So already, I'm not even going to touch this guy because who doesn't want one of these in their studio? They're very useful. You see them in most major studios, even smaller studios. It's a Japanese speaker that's discontinued. And there's just some sort of magic about it where if you get your mix to sound good through one of these, your mix is going to sound good everywhere. So I'm going to keep that right there. What else am I going to find useful here? I know that a lot of people listen to music on their laptops, unfortunately. So I'm going to go ahead and select this right here. This is a simulation of a very popular laptop. And I'm going to select a monitor that I'm very familiar with from an old studio I used to work at, because I just know how it sounds, and having that available to me in this space is very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and play the music and toggle between these speakers just to let you hear what they sound like. Also, I'm going to adjust the volume trims because it's very important when toggling between listening systems that you are volume matched. Otherwise, the comparison isn't exactly accurate. Here we go.
The pretender tries to steal our eyes, and they're watching but I know what I saw, and it reminds me of someone I used to know. But understanding what went wrong, you learned your lesson long ago.
Now, those of you that have used these speakers in real life are probably smiling right now because that's what they sound like. And this is extremely useful already. I'm already hearing things about my mix that I didn't notice before, about how the bass is working with the guitars and with the voice. In most situations, people pick their favorite 3 speakers because too many options is often too much, and they just keep them there, and that's what they use. But of course, you have a lot of different speakers to choose from. So that is the main part of the plugin and the part that took us the longest to develop. These are not ear-matched EQ curves. These are real multi-layered simulations of these speakers, and they react just like they do. In addition to that, we also added features that are available in most master sections and most monitor controllers. We have mono, we have dim, left and right mute, flipping the phase on the left, flipping left and right. Sometimes you find that just flipping those two is what your mix was missing. And we have a couple of really special features here. The radio button is an average of the change in frequency response that happens when your master is broadcast from a radio antenna and then received by a radio receiver. A lot of stuff happens in the air on the way. So let's have a listen to that for a second.
The pretender tries to steal our eyes, and they're watching but I know what I saw.
You can hear that the top end is a little bit different. The low end is a little bit mushier. So in the future, when you're working on your mix, you no longer have to wonder what your work is going to sound like after the radio antennas have their way with it. Also, you can combine the radio button and any other button here with the speaker simulations. So if I want to know what my song through the radio on the Japan Classic would sound like, I can listen to that.
The pretender tries to steal our eyes, and they'll
I don't think it's very easy to get a radio receiver to play through a laptop, but even though that scenario is unlikely, you can very quickly simulate that here.
The pretender tries to steal.
Flexibility of routing environments and combinations is what Perspective really excels at. Now, over here, we have a talkback button. Now, the talkback button does away with the traditional physical talkback hardware that you would need in order to communicate with a musician or an actor in another room. And we're going to go over how to set the talkback up in a later section of this video. Another very important part of mixing is making sure that our audio sounds good in one of the most common, quote unquote, hi-fi systems people listen through today. And those, of course, are cars. Most people don't sit at home and listen to music anymore through speakers, at least not through hi-fi ones. And cars are the closest thing we get. It's up to you whether that's a good or a bad thing. So we have a couple of very meticulously measured and recreated options. We have an SUV, and we have a very common smaller car to choose from. Let's have a listen to what those sound like.
He's sitting by himself in the middle of the room. On the chair, he's staying there, and he won't believe in soon. Takes out the
You may find that these simulations sound a little bit jarring compared to the clean signal, but that's because you never get to instantly appear in a car after listening on studio speakers or on headphones. So these are the only simulations we have in perspective that actually do include acoustics as well. A massive part of the sound of car speakers is the actual shape of the car. So that is included in the car simulations and only in the car simulations. Now, in addition to that, and this brings us to the settings page over here, we've added another very important feature to these car simulations. You may have found that listening to your mix in the car doesn't really do your mix justice in terms of what it's going to sound like in a car. Because then later, when you're listening to the same mix in a car but you're driving, you may notice that a lot of things are missing from your work. That's because road noise works a lot like white noise. So what we did, and you can select this right through here, is we added traffic ambience. So this is a stereo recording of traffic ambience on a North American highway. And these only work when selecting traffic ambience and selecting whatever volume you'd like with the car simulation. So let's have a listen to that.
He's sitting by himself in the middle of the room. On the chair, he's staying there and he won't believe in soon. Takes out the old guitar to play his simple song. Looks around.
If I listen to another monitor that is not a car, the traffic ambience stops playing.
Somebody tell him, I wanna tell them, nobody sees a crime take place. Don't go to him, no, don't approve him, just let him play with that.
Personally, I find this to be one of the most useful features of perspective. And this brings us to the settings page. Let's look at some of the other options we have with the plugin through the settings page. So of course, when you click on the gears over here, the settings page opens. From the top left to the bottom right, let's look at the features. The talkback dim function automatically connects the dim control with the talkback control. So every time you hit the talkback, your main mix diminishes in volume. You have your dim volume control over here. So for example, if I make this really loud, my dim doesn't work anymore.
He's sitting by himself in the middle of the room. On the
So I
chair,
go here.
staying there and he won't believe in soon. Takes out the old guitar to play his simple song.
Some people like their dim to almost be a mute, and you can do that here if you'd really like to. Next, we have the subwoofer control. Perspective is completely compatible with any subwoofer you may have. By selecting the subwoofer button over here, Perspective will no longer send any of the speaker simulation to the subwoofer, letting it work uninterrupted. All you have to do is input the settings of your subwoofer. Those are usually written on the subwoofer itself or in the manual, and engage the subwoofer button. Also, you have a subwoofer volume control over here, which can save you a lot of time and having to go behind your desk to adjust that for different situations. So to illustrate this, I'm going to select a speaker that does not have a lot of bass and show you how you can get your bass back with the subwoofer. What are we going to choose? Here you go, a 6-inch speaker right there. Let's go ahead and play.
He's sitting by himself in the middle of the room. On the chair, he's staying there and he won't believe in soon. Takes out the old guitar to play his simple song. Looks around to see who's there, but no one to say he's wrong.
That last setting is not very likely, but hey, we put it in there just in case. I'm going to go ahead and turn that back off. But if you have a subwoofer and you want to use it, you can set it up and keep using perspective without interfering with your subwoofer very quickly. Over here, we have the room compensation button. It's very important to note that perspective does not compensate or fix rooms in any way. It is very difficult and in some situations not possible to adjust anything in your room using DSP or any kind of equalization through your speakers. It's very important that your room is properly treated. Perspective only changes how your speakers behave. Nothing about reverb comes out of this plugin. However, we found that some speakers, especially speakers with tweeters, tend to radiate in different angles from one another. So sometimes this results in very high frequencies reflecting off of the left and right walls to the listener in different intensities. So we've added this room compensation button right here, which automatically is added to the speakers that do tend to radiate in a wider pattern. In most situations, unless you're working in a very, very dead room or using headphones, we recommend you keep this on because it will sound a lot more realistic. However, this plugin is about giving you the most perspective and being the most useful for your ears, not necessarily about being the most accurate, even though it is. So if you find the plugin to be more helpful without room compensation, then go ahead and use it that way. It's really up to you and what helps you achieve better results. Once you have your settings saved, let's say that I work in film and I want to frequently check what my mix is going to sound like through a TV and through a laptop, and just because I'm a big Quincy Jones fan, through a mix square. I find that these three speakers are the most useful to me in my workflow, and I also find that I want to keep my subwoofer setting. You can save your settings right here just by clicking on Save Settings. And from now on, every time you open this plugin, it will open with these exact settings. Let's talk about the talkback. So when looking at perspective, you see this talkback function right here, which in many ways is a huge money and time saver. This talkback will work just like any talkback you would find at any studio, and it only takes a couple of minutes to set up. All you need is an extra input in your interface and a spare microphone. So I have a spare SM58 plugged into a spare input in my interface right now. So all I'm going to do now is create a new aux track. Mono, since my microphone is mono in this case. And I'm going to select the appropriate input. In this case, it's my Apollo number 4. So right away, you can see that there is a microphone active there. In order for my talkback function to work, all I have to do is go back to Oscillot and select the Perspective Talkback remote. It tells you that the plugin is connected to the main plugin, and that's it. You never need to look at this plugin again. And now you'll notice that there's no more audio passing through my track, which I will name Talkback. You choose where you want to send this track. In most cases, you probably want to send it out to the queue send, not to your own output. And from there, all I have to do now is click on Talkback. And there you go. My talkback is back. You can see movement happening right over here. Now, the way this button works is just like any other talkback. When you press and hold, talkback is engaged until you let go. But also, some people seem to like a latch function that isn't available with all talkbacks, but we've included that here. So if you press and hold, talkback will be engaged until you let go. But if you just click quickly, talkback stays on, and you can just keep that communications channel open with your artist. Now, it'd be very useful to have this button available at all times, but of course, Perspective is a fairly large plugin, and we don't want this taking up so much real estate. So we've added this minimize function, and when you click on that, the plugin shrinks like that and gives you only the essentials, especially for recording, which is mono, if you want to quickly check your phase coherency and anything else in mono. We've got the talkback functionality. Again, it works the exact same way, only minimized. And we have diminish right here in case somebody in the room wants to talk to you, or you just need to turn down the volume for a second. And if you take this plugin out of focus right here, you can open and close other plugins without losing your talkback. I usually like to put it on the bottom right over here and use a touch screen. And all of these buttons are set up to very comfortably be used on a touch screen. They're regular button sized. And that's so you can use this talkback during a recording session without the plugin taking up too much screen real estate. In fact, you can even push it deeper this way and have it barely take up any space. Once you're ready to use perspective again in its full glory, you just click on the maximize button right there, and your full functionality is back. So that covers the basics of how perspective works. We're confident that perspective is going to help bring your mix and master game way up. All the tools in the world don't replace being able to hear exactly what you're doing and what your mix has too much of or too little of. So I really hope you enjoy this plugin and find it useful, and I'll be seeing you with the next plugin.